What's up everybody, AgBully here, back with a new video. Got a request to do a video on custom slider settings for CPU versus CPU matchups. This is just a general video on kind of how I set up CPU versus CPU matchups for a more realistic fight. So let's get into it. So one cool thing about the UFC 4, one new thing anyway that I like, is the functionality of slider settings that is new to the game. So usually when I set up my CPU versus CPU matches, as far as the sliders go, is usually dependent on the opponents that I'm picking. So in this case, it's Brandon Moreno versus Deivison Figueiredo. When I thought about the fight, I thought the fight was going to play out in Brandon Moreno's favor. He looked good in the last fight. I thought he was going to be the dominant force in this fight. If you watch the fight, obviously it was a pretty close fight. It was a back and forth fight, and Deivison Figueiredo was able to pull it off. But before the fight, when I set up this CPU versus CPU match, I felt like Brandon Moreno had the edge on it, so I went with Brandon Moreno for the win. So accordingly, when I set up the sliders for the matchup, I set it in Brandon Moreno's favor, which was the red corner. So stamina cost, I gave Brandon Moreno the red corner favor, so I dropped Deivison Figueiredo the blue corner, his slider down on the stamina. He is the much bigger guy, so I figured it cost him a little more stamina each round, and I want to kind of reflect that in the matchup. So his slider's down on that. The damage, again, I wanted to favor Brandon Moreno to win the match. I actually wanted him to win by knockout in the third round. So again, I jammed up the slider for his damage, and then took down the blue corner's damage, and to kind of minimize the chances of Deivison Figueiredo finishing the fight. Transition speed, I jammed all the way up. If the fight did happen to take place on the ground, I did want it to be there very long, so bumping up the transition speed means when the opponent takes another opponent down, their passing and moving around is a lot faster than normal. So by picking up the slider, or sliding the slider all the way to the right, means the transitions are really fast. I did this in hopes of getting the fight back to the feet as fast as it could. And then submission speed, same thing. If the fight took place on the ground, I wanted the submissions to be negated, and I wanted them to happen as fast as they could. So this kind of works both ways. If the sliders are up, that means the submissions are that much faster. You want to use the sliders for determining the outcome of the fight, and I did not want the fight to end in a submission, so I slid all the submission speed all the way to the right in hopes that if the fight did go down to the ground and a submission was attempted, hopefully the fight wouldn't have ended in submission because the speeds were so fast. One cool thing about the UFC for custom event sliders, or the CPU versus CPU fighters or sliders, is this feature to choose the AI style of each corner. I quite don't know the differences between each style. Maybe I'll do another video and do some testing to see what the differences are, and maybe do a breakdown at different weight classes of each AI style. But basically, when I chose Brandon Moreno's style, I chose Striker 2, just as a chance, had a chance. I wanted him to strike more with his hands and his feet. He has a really good stand-up game, and I wanted that to reflect in the game, so I chose his style to be a striker. And then the blue corner, I chose Brawler for Deivison Figueiredo because he has that really in-your-face pressure style, so I chose Brawler. Again, I don't really know the differences between Brawler, 3 and 4, but I think I'll do another video to see what the differences are, maybe at different weight classes, to actually figure out what they're doing differently. I don't know why there would be 3 settings for 4 or 5 of them even. So there's got to be differences in between these 4. If you guys are interested in something like that, comment down below and let me know if that's something you guys would want to see. Stand-up striking frequency, again, I wanted Brandon Moreno to have more significant strikes, but I didn't want Deivison Figueiredo to kind of stand around either, so I bumped his slider up a bit and then bumped Brandon Moreno's sliders much more, again in hopes to kind of like push the fight in the direction of Brandon Moreno. Grappling strike frequency, that wasn't a big deal to me. I did adjust the sliders accordingly though. I thought if Deivison Figueiredo were to engage in the clinch, he'd be the more powerful fighter and would probably throw more strikes. Brandon Moreno is kind of crafty on the feet, so he's hard to kind of clinch up, so I would imagine if Deivison Figueiredo was able to get the clinch on him, he would be able to land some of the strikes at such a close distance, so his strike frequency for grappling is bumped up. Takedown frequency, I felt Deivison Figueiredo is the stronger of the two, so I figured he would be pushing the takedowns a lot more in the fight. So I jammed his sliders all the way up, and then Brandon Moreno I figured would keep the fight standing on his feet. So I slid his sliders to the left. I didn't slide them all the way down. I did want the fight to have the mixed martial arts feel, where it wasn't just a stand-up fight, it was kind of like an MMA fight basically, which it was. So I kept the slider about a quarter of the way to hopefully maybe get 1 or 2 takedowns, but again, I didn't want that to be a significant factor in the fight, so again, it's not all the way up. Clinch frequency, again, I figured Brandon Moreno was gonna employ a striker style, so I didn't really see him clinching as much, but I did think Deivison Figueiredo would have engaged more in the clinch, so his sliders, it's actually defaulted to the default setting, and then Brandon Moreno's is much lower, so I didn't want him to clinch up. I wanted the fight to take more of a stand and bang feel, where Brandon would hurt Deivison Figueiredo, which would cause him to look for the takedowns and clinches. So it's kind of lopsided in that sense, where Brandon Moreno isn't really pulling for clinches and Deivison Figueiredo is. Submission frequency, I slid them both down all the way. I did not want the fight to end in a submission, so both of them are slid all the way down. Weight classes are strict. And yeah, that's pretty much for the sliders. Usually if you're trying to get the most realistic outcomes for the fight, you kind of want to adjust the sliders dependent on each fighter's strengths. So Brandon Moreno is a really good striker, has really good footwork, he's fast, he doesn't really go for takedowns, although he is crafty on the feet with his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu. He did finish the second fight with a submission. I thought his boxing overall was his centerpiece of his fighting style, so I wanted to kind of focus and feature that in this fight. Deivison Figueiredo is a much more powerful in-your-face brawler type, so selecting that style, the AI style, kind of lends him to that style in this fight. But also the sliders that I set for him kind of like amp that up too. So he's not really going for takedowns, he's not really going for clinches. I set him up to be in Brandon's face with a lot of pressure, and I feel like I kind of got that out of this fight. So yeah, these are kind of the things that I think about when I'm setting up my sliders. Again, if you're going for the realistic fight, try to set up your sliders for the style of fight, or the finish that you're looking for. So if you're trying to go for a submission, go heavy on the submission sliders and the ground sliders, not so much on the striking sliders. If you're trying to get the fight finished by striking, go heavy on the striking. I gotta do some research to see whether or not leaving them at default, like how the fight ends more if you leave the sliders on default. Do they end more in submissions, or do they end more in striking? I would assume it leans to the fighter's fight style. So if you're setting up a fight between the striker and a grappler, the grappler is gonna more than not try to finish the fight on the ground, and the striker is gonna finish the fight standing. So, and you can kind of manipulate and tweak how much more the striker will be able to finish as a striker, and then how much the submission artist will be able to employ a submission and takedowns by using these sliders. So yeah, if you guys have questions about any of the sliders that I'm doing or that I'm using, feel free to ask in the comments. Again, I think I'm going to do another video on striker, or all these AI styles, kind of see what the differences are at different weight classes. That'll probably be another video. I don't got much time in this video, but yeah, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe. Much love, y'all. Peace.